Understanding is what it's all about, and I hope that you're understanding that we're here. We're here with you, and we're here every Sunday at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesday mornings at 9 a.m., streaming live at those times at richarddugan.com. We also hope that you will go to the podcasts on SoundCloud and iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Stitcher, Player FM, a lot of different places on the web, and also YouTube where you can watch these videos. I hope you'll subscribe to all of that good stuff so that every time I post a new interview, you will be notified and you can listen to our guests and what they have to offer in terms of changing the world and transforming it. That's a better way to put it. Transforming the world better for the better for all of us, not just a select few. That's not what it's about, at least not from my perspective. My guest is returning after a couple of years, year and a half, 2 years, and it's great to have her back again. And we are going to talk about a set of cards, if you will, and they're more than that. Stephanie Redfeather, welcome back to Tell Me Your Story.
Thank you, Richard.
It's a pleasure to have you back. I love your background with all the stars back there, and how coincidental, actually it's not, that your website, bluestar.org, is your website, bluestartemple.org. I'm guessing that that's the temple behind you, or the entrance thereof. I love it. I think it's great, and we can use all of the stars that we can wish upon to make our lives better. And those of the people around us. You first joined us some time ago with a book that you had just released having to do with being an empath. And, it is something that we all, I guess we do. I suppose you would know better than any of the rest of us, that basically would help us to better navigate our own lives in terms of being an empath, the evolutionary empath. Back in 2020, the 2020 Golden winner, Personal Growth and Self-Help of the COVR Visionary Award. Congratulations on that, as well as bringing us this particular work that we're talking about. But also you now have a set of cards that you have, I'm going to put it this way, infused with your own energy. Empath Activation Codes. It's your highest anticipated new work that comes out, that has come out 23rd of November. And you can go to her website. Again, that website is bluestartemple.org. And it is a card deck and guidebook. And it's Stephanie Redfeather, PhD. What's the PhD for?
Well, I got my master's and doctorate in shamanic studies. So I have a doctorate of shamanic studies, for what that's worth.
Well, apparently it's worth something because you're utilizing it. And by the way, I went to a website you sent me a link to take a look at, I'm guessing it's the backs of the cards. Is that right?
You mean to look at the digital version of the card?
Yes.
Yes. So the back of the card, everything is the same, so that's so you can, turn them over, not know what they are, and choose. So what you saw were each of the individual images of all 44 cards.
Yeah. And I have to tell you, in looking at them, I had a different feeling, literally a different feeling from each card and each design, if you will. As a matter of fact, there was even one, I can't remember the name of it. They do have names, that actually I didn't feel good about. In other words, it gave me kind of a uneasy feeling. It was the only one. And I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know what that was.
Well, if I can find the link, I can pull it up. If I can remember where that link is to the website that you shared.
Yeah, and you can always share with me offline as
Sure,
well.
sure, sure. Absolutely. Probably better to do it that way. But I just, what struck me was not so much the feeling I had of that one card, as much um, as the fact that I was having a different response to each card, each back side. And I'm wondering if you've ever had anybody else who, not so much the backs, but maybe even as you're giving them a reading with these cards, or, well, you wouldn't have yet because they haven't come out yet, but when you have shared in this regard, if you've ever had that kind of an experience where, one card pops up, maybe it's the death card, which I think is a great card myself because it's a transformation that's the way I look at it.
Mhm.
Um, uh, Endings and beginnings kind of thing. Some people, they see the death card, oh my God, and it's like, calm down. Talk.
Yeah, I have had that experience. I've had a number of people look at the deck so that they could write a foreword and endorsements, and I've had incredible responses to this deck. And I think one of the things that makes it potent is not only did I write the messages, but I created the art, and it's not unheard of. But most of the time, when you buy an oracle deck, the artist is different than the writer. And so I think there's a cohesiveness, and definitely my prayer when I wrote all of these and sat at my art table was for these to be activational, to be a channel, that each of these images would hold coding, like an individual prescription, if you will, for each person who interacts with those cards and messages.
Yeah. Well, I have to say that the artwork of your empathy activation cards is quite extraordinary in that you have drawn all of these. You have, and I'm curious as to what the type of how was this done? Watercolor, oil,
Right. Yeah.
mosaic kind of thing. What did you do?
Well, the originals are on 8 by 10 canvases. And so these were a combination of just acrylic paint, but also paint pens for some of the finer detailed work. And the theme that very clearly came to me right at the beginning is circles and dots. So every single card has some form of circles and or dots that are specifically acting as those transmission devices of the activational frequencies.
Hmm. And how did you come up with, I mean, how many different images are there? 44?
There's 44, and traditionally the smallest number of oracle cards in a deck is 44. I've seen ones all the way up to 72. So part of it was just a practical decision of, I'm running out of time and I need to get this to my publisher. But I was also tuning into spirit and my guides and just listening. It's like, okay, does there need to be more? I will make more. And they said, no, 44 is it.
I just think it's really kind of cool. Plus, as a matter of fact, I finally found the link and so forth. And just really, really, like I said, it fascinates me, like I said, to see these cards and how they, how they can make one feel. And I'm not going to share with anybody. I'll share with you off the program, but it's just quite extraordinary. Matter of fact, what I'm going to do for those people who are, you can now see folks in the video, her cards. I mean, beautiful, beautiful artwork. Now, have nothing to do per se with the cups and the wands and so forth, or the higher arcana. These are literally the backs of the cards. Is that correct, or are these the front?
Well, it's funny. Some people call it the front, some people call it the back. I had to get really clear with my publisher. So to me, when I'm holding up my deck now, so I think of this as the back of the card, that all has the same image. So when they lay
Okay.
face down, when you're drawing the cards or shuffling them or whatever. I think of that as the back. I think of the individual images as the front. I could be wrong, but that's what makes sense.
But this is different than a set of tarot cards.
It is correct. Yeah, this
How
is
so?
not a tarot deck.
How so?
Because it doesn't adopt any of the major or minor arcana. It doesn't adopt, there's a zillion different tarot decks out there that with different interpretations of the images, but it's always Two of Cups, the Four of Wands, like you said, the Hanged Man, the Death card. This is not based in tarot at all. These are all just messages channeled from spirit that don't fall in a traditional tarot format.
What I'm showing you and our viewers who are looking on YouTube are two cards here. The first one, which is at the top, is called 30. It's 38, and it's Sirius. I believe that's how it's pronounced.
It is, yes.
And the image.
I say those images are a little pixelated, I think, just because they're still loading on the website. So the images are much clearer than that in real life.
Right. But one of the things that I found interesting, and I'm zooming in just a little bit, the bottom of the card, you know what that looks like more to me than anything else? A diagram of a circuit board.
Oh, how interesting.
And then 39 is the Pleiades. And there's another one that looks like, the bottom portion of the card looks like a circuit board. Very interesting. I like that.
Those are actually Bohemian, Kabbalistic Bohemian symbols. There are, without going into too much esoteric information, there are a certain number of fixed stars. And so the ancient alchemists had symbols for each one of them. And so I did not make those up. Those symbols came from those royal Kabbalistic star symbols. Card
number 44 is the Great Year. And then you go into the book. The little book that'll come with explanation, as it were. Very, very fascinating. I love this stuff. This is very intriguing because it opens up a realm for people to kind of look at these kinds of things. And of course how would you say these images were channeled? Did they come from someplace? Other than deep within inside of Stephanie Redfeather?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because when I got my author's copy and finally held the deck in my hands for the first time, I had a really profound reaction to them. Like barely could talk, hardly could breathe. I was so blown away by their energy. And I had a conversation with my spirit guides. I'm like, am I having an ego trip about this deck that I created? And they said, no. They said, you were the messenger, you were the channel, you were our hands, you were our voice. What you're responding to came through you, but it came from us. And so they were like, it's okay to have that reaction because it really came from a higher source. And like I said, it's always my prayer when I sit down, when I wrote my book, The Evolutionary Empath, when I did this, that I sit down, center myself, call in my guides, and just ask literally to be that channel. Let me bring through whatever wants to come through me to be of service.
I've got several drawing books of different sizes that I have drawn in over the years. I haven't of late, well, I take that back. There was a time back in early September when I did a little drawing. Mine are more abstract, and what I do is I will create an initial shape that might be round, it might be squared off kind of thing, like connecting the dots type of thing. And then I draw lines or what have you that creates spaces inside the area. And then I have one rule when I do that particular type of drawing or what have you. No two adjacent spaces can have the same or similar color. And I use colored or felt tipped or colored pencils. And it comes out as sort of a mosaic kind of looking thing, and that's kind of fun. And I've seen some of that, and I thought that's rather interesting. I'm going to have to somehow scan that in so I can use that. For example, many of our listeners know that I am now for the first time in my life, I am actually a songwriter. I've only written one song, but I guess I can actually say that. And it's just one of those outlets as I was going through a particular period in my life that this song came out, and I'm thinking, okay, I like the images that I chose for the video, but what if I put some of these other things in there, and somehow fit them, it's just I'm just having a lot of fun with this kind of thing. It's just really very cool.
Yeah.
We're talking with Stephanie Redfeather. I'm Richard Dugan, your host here on Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World, as we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. I want to talk to you, Stephanie Redfeather, about, first of all, and I may have asked you this the last time you were on the program, but it's been a while, Redfeather. Is that your given name, or was that a name that was given to you?
It is a name that was given to me. When I was having a healing session, I want to say it was 2006. I've kind of lost track, but it's been quite a while ago. I was doing a healing session with one of my shamanic teachers and mentors. And I was standing on a buffalo hide and had my eyes closed. He was taking me through a process. And all of a sudden, I had this very clear vision. And in front of me was it was nighttime. It was in a valley. There was a Native American tribe. There was a fire. I was essentially in the fire, and there was a beautiful Native American man dancing in profile, and he had a full headdress, but all the feathers were red. And all of a sudden, it just like blasted me, and I came out of the process we were doing to get my mentor's attention and said, I think I'm being given a name. And so I told him what happened, and we shifted gears, and we actually did this beautiful ceremony, this beautiful naming ceremony where we anchored it into the earth grid. And then when I got married in 2011, I took it on as my legal last name.
It's interesting how people will do that over the course of time. They will take on a name. And for a year or two, back in 1999, 2000, and so forth, I was known by another name. And I kind of liked the name. And I've thought about, gee, should I change my legal name to this? What do you think is the impetus? Because a lot of times, Richard, you look like a Richard, Okay. Why would you want to change your name when you look like the name that you were given by your mother and your father? No disrespect to mom and dad, but I don't think that, it fits anymore. I'm not saying that that's literally true, but in terms of our conversation here, I'm curious about, was there ever any thought whatsoever in that regard to, well, gee, mom and dad named me this, and this is the name I've been known by forever, and if I do change my name, you have any idea the level of paperwork involved, kind of thing.
Right.
Talk to me about that part of it, the very material part, but also the more spiritual or metaphysical aspect of someone taking on a different name.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was born with the last name Reeder. And when I got married to my first husband, his last name is Roth. And so I took on Roth as my last name at the time. And, I think names have power. They have frequency and energy. And I got divorced in 2006, but I still kept my last name of Roth. And so when I met my current husband, I had evolved, I'd had my spiritual awakening, I had some different beliefs and views, and I no longer subscribed to the practice of taking the husband's last name. And my current husband's totally fine with that. And so I thought, okay, I don't want to bring my first husband's last name into my new marriage. I don't want to take my husband's last name, and I feel complete with my maiden name. So I was like, Spirit, I need a last name.
Hello.
Said you got one. And I went through this whole process like, what? Red feather? Huh? What are people going to think? Oh my God. So I went through this whole process of just doubt and oh my gosh and all of that kind of stuff. And finally realized that it was an initiation, that red feather carried the frequency, the vibration of what I was stepping into. And then I didn't have to know what that meant to do it, because that's what initiation is, right? It's like trusting, stepping through the portal, and then the next steps are revealed. It's not the opposite where you get to know everything in advance and then make a decision and do it, right? It's a leap of faith, if you will, trusting the energies that are calling you forward. And so for anybody contemplating it, I think it's a very personal choice. I went by the name Red Feather in spiritual circles for a number of years as an informal name. And my marriage kind of, I don't want to say forced to the point, but it brought it to the surface of, okay, it's time to make a choice here. And the right choice for me was to take that on as my legal last name, which is a side commentary I find is fascinating, that I had to do a separate legal process to do that. When you sign the marriage paperwork, if I was going to take my husband's last name, then that marriage paperwork would have sufficed. But because I was doing a different last name, I had to go through a whole separate legal process.
That's crazy. That's crazy. Well, and I do have to say, and the laws are what they are. When I went through my first divorce, before, I one of the things that I wanted to have done, because I just didn't feel good about it internally, was I did not want my former wife to have my last name, my family's last name. But there was nothing I could do about it. That was her choice. Primarily because the way it worked out, she sued me. I didn't sue her. And I found out it was a lawsuit. A divorce is just that. It is a lawsuit from a legal standpoint. But you know what? It is what it is. And it gets me to wondering sometimes how happy people are sometimes, in this case, my former wife, with their last name and or with their family. Maybe there's situations where, you know what, I don't want to, just like what you just referred to about your former husband, your ex-husband, what have you. I don't want that. I don't want to carry that into my new life, and so on and so forth. We're talking with Stephanie Redfeather, and I'm glad that we are. We want you to go to her website, which is bluestartemple.org. Check out the Evolutionary Empath. I want to talk more about empathy here on Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. We're talking with Stephanie Redfeather, and her book, The Evolutionary Empath, of course, is a bestseller, an international bestseller, award winner as well. And we had you on several years ago talking about this book. Empathy. Interesting concept. And I say concept only because I have known and lived with my present partner, my present wife, is an empath. However, she did not know this until maybe 5 or 10 years ago. We've been together for 23. Kept wondering, what is going on? What's wrong with me? I keep feeling this way and that way and the other way, and it's driving me crazy. She would be crying and carrying on and so forth. And I didn't know, but I kept telling her, and maybe this was from my inner voice, I said, it's not you, it's them, not making the connection between them and being an empath. And it turns out it was them. Now, how do you protect yourself when you're in a crowd of people? You're in a workspace. You're wherever you are, where there are other human beings, and sometimes I guess it doesn't matter whether you're anywhere near other human beings. That energy is just going out. How do you protect yourself? Because that would, it's darn near did drive her crazy.
Yeah, and that is one of the most important first steps. When an empath becomes aware that she or he is an empath, the conversation in our head usually turns to, oh my God, what do I do now?
Yeah.
And so, because for most of us in our unconscious years, we have no idea that we are so sensitive that it's easy. Our superpower is blending and merging with other people. So the other side of that coin is it is very difficult for us to figure out where we end and the next person begins.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's important to understand that the idea of boundaries and what I call energy hygiene, it's a process. So it's not a switch that you just flip and bzz, okay, the boundary is up, everything's good now. It's something that you have to develop an awareness of and do a regular maintenance of. But the first thing that I tell people is you need to become aware of or start to visualize, or if you're not a visual person, use whatever sense works for you, your energetic container, your sovereign field, right? However you think of it. I had a client that thought of it as her hamster ball rolling around on the floor, so it's whatever works, but that concept then gives you access to the understanding of I get to choose where I end and the next person begins. I get to choose who and what I let into my field. And if something creeps into my field without my knowing, then it's my job to clear it, release it, ground it, etc. And there's tons of practices for doing that.
I know that it was suggested that one protective measure wouldn't completely shield you, but it was helpful, was smoky quartz crystal.
Mm-hmm. I work with the crystal and mineral kingdom quite frequently. My favorites for protection, which are almost all of them simultaneously are good for grounding as well, are any of the black or metallic stones, which are also associated with the first chakra.
Mm-hmm.
And so those, like one of my favorites is black tourmaline, but as soon as gabbro came onto the market and shungite, those are also right up there with my favorites that I use quite a bit. And so, a person can wear it as a necklace or a bracelet, or carry a stone in their pocket. But these are also living sentient beings. And so it's important to understand that they need to be cleared too, right? So if they're serving in the capacity of helping to absorb dense and disharmonious energies for you, those stones or whatever you're using need to be cleared as well so that they can be as high functioning as possible.
What other modalities do you utilize in facilitating, supporting someone, helping them in their transformational process?
Mm-hmm. I have a lot of tools. I started out with Reiki, so I'm a Reiki master. I taught it for over 10 years. I use Reiki a lot. Crystals and stones. I have a lot of training in shamanic practices. I study and practice in a Peruvian tradition called the Pachacuti Mesa tradition. And so there's cord cutting processes, soul retrievals, limpias, which is kind of another name for a deep cleansing. I also have some more, I wouldn't call it talk therapy, but I'm trained in voice dialogue, which is a way of talking to different parts in your psyche. So it kind of feels like talk therapy, but it's way more somatic, if you will, experiential than that.
Mm-hmm.
I use ceremony, I use guided journeys. So really, I don't have a specific protocol. I listen to and tune into the person that I'm working with and listen to my guides and their guides as to what feels like the right thing to support them.
Mm. Well, Stephanie Redfeather's my guest here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and we are going to continue our conversation with her. I want to talk more about the aspects of some of the other realms within, as I like to put it, the context of metaphysics or spirituality here on Tell Me Your Story. Stay tuned. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and we're talking with Stephanie Redfeather. One of the things that I'm very intrigued by are the different aspects of spirituality and many of the different things that people experience. I had a gentleman on the program several years ago, and he's a born-again, Bible-believing Christian, and yet he also practices, and I found this fascinating, out-of-the-body experiences. He actually induces these experiences, to which I asked him, I said, now wait a minute, I'm pretty familiar with the Bible. I've read it a few times. I don't know nowhere in that Bible that you are allowed to practice out-of-body experiences until you die. And and he says, I don't know if it does or doesn't. All I know is I like doing it. And I said, I asked him about, do you ever not want to come back? He said, oh, no, 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 no. And I found that so interesting. I want to talk to you a little bit about that in terms of that being something or something akin to it, okay? Embodiment, disembodiment, that kind of thing, that we might incorporate into our transformational process, and why that would be something of a good thing for us to experience, if we are led to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have a lot to say on the matter, so
you go, girl, you go.
One of the pillars of my work is actually embodiment. And I had an experience a number of years ago that just really brought it front and center for me. And what came to me was so many kind of the traditional spiritual teachings, even some schools of tantric practice, a lot of the religious dogma, they all point towards, in some way or another, the upward movement of energy, right? We want to transcend the body. We want to transcend the human emotions. And, some of them that even say the flesh is weak, the body is sinful, desires are of the devil, whatever that is, it's always this focus on leaving the body, connecting, going up high out of the body. And so there's a lot to say there that we don't have time to get into. So I'm wildly summarizing.
That's fine.
But so many of those practices take us out of our body. And to a certain extent, those practices are important. If you're looking at a well-balanced human/spiritual practice, we're going to have meditation, out-of-body experiences, peak experiences of rapture or ecstasy. But if that's all we do and nothing else, that was the epiphany that I had, is what is the point of coming into a human body if all we're trying to do is leave it again, right? There has to be some reason that we chose to come into the body. And so a lot of my practices focus on getting in the body, not because, quote, leaving it for these aesthetic practices or upward directed practices is wrong, but to create balance, because there's not enough of the embodiment practices. And so that there really is a disembodiment epidemic in the world. And so there's a whole lot more I could say about that, but being in the body, there's a reason we chose to come onto planet Earth, to incarnate in a human body, to have the human experience. So I feel like it's not about leaving the body as much as it is bringing our spirituality all the way down into our body and grounding it into the earth plane.
I find that interesting because part of my challenge 6 months to a year ago, over the period of a few years back, was the construct, and that's how I view it, the construct of dualism. Now, you actually addressed where I am kind of coming from, in that most all the ancient wisdom teachings tell us where we come from, the one. And they also tell us where we're going to, the one. And so I would ask the same kind of question that you just posed. Well, then what the heck are we doing here in this dualistic world? And it wasn't until I began to take a look at the macrocosmic and microcosmic worlds. And macrocosmic, and I've talked about this many times on the program, You look out through, let's just say, the Hubble telescope, and you're watching the universe just going wild. Things are moving around and crashing and exploding and changing and imploding and this and that and the other thing. And we, as human beings, as spiritual beings having human experience, we go, wow, kind of like watching fireworks. When you look at the microcosmic world, it's the same reaction. Wow, that is wild. There is no judgment of any kind by the universe on itself. It's just doing what it's doing. So I'd say, well, then why are we judging this level of existence where we live? And it then dawned on me, there is no dualism. Things just are the way they are. And it's like that Chinese story, I mean, maybe you're familiar with it, about the farmer and his son. And the neighbor comes over and asks, so how are things going today? And the farmer starts telling them the story. And each day he responds differently, the neighbor, to the story. He says, oh, that's good. Oh, that's bad. Oh, that's good. Oh, that's bad. And the farmer's reaction is the same every time. Who's to say whether it's good or bad? And that's really how I have finally come to my own personal understanding. And everything that I talk about from my perspective is from me, not for anybody else. And if you want it, that's fine. But I'm not putting it on anybody else. That's not why I'm here. But I finally realized things just are the way they are. And people wonder why, when I'm going through what they perceive as rather tumultuous times, why I am so happy, why I am so excited, why I am so optimistic. It's because this is just, hey, this is temporary. None of this is permanent, okay? You know, let's just go back a few, 100 years or so. World War I, temporary. What did they call it? The 20s. Oh my God.
The Roaring 20s?
The Roaring 20s, temporary. The Depression, temporary. World War II, temporary. And the list goes on. The 60s, sexual revolution, temporary. Disco.
Unfortunately, temporary.
And don't get me wrong. I'm not saying either way that it was good or bad. I'm just saying it was temporary. And administration after administration, temporary. And on and on and on. And life is temporary. So that's kind of where I've been coming from. And it sort of dovetails off of what you were just talking about. Change is not just inevitable. It's the one constant in the universe. I'm curious about your thoughts in regards to change. Mine is we need to embrace it. We need to love it. We need to encourage it. And we need to make it our friend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what that makes me think of is the concept of surrendering, which I used to suck at. For anybody who plays with astrology, I have 4 planets in Scorpio. So I have a really strong will. And I spent 10 years as an Air Force officer. And so in my earlier life, I was very good at forcing and making it happen and by-godding and shoving that square peg in that round hole. And a big part of my spiritual awakening, one of the ways I describe it, is reclaiming the feminine. And the feminine understands the nature of change, flow. The feminine understands grace and moving with, bending like the willow, if you will, as opposed to the rigidness of the oak tree, which also has its own benefits. And so for me, surrendering is about understanding that I have my will, I have what I wish would happen or want to happen, and then there is what is happening. So how can I make peace with that? Where can I affect change, and where do I need to accept what's happening and bend and sway?
We're talking with our very special guest, and she has joined us. Where are you all? Where are you located?
Yeah, I'm in Kansas City, Missouri.
Kansas City. All right. Well, thank you so much for taking time out there, and I guess they call it the breadbasket.
Yep, the Midwest.
The Midwest. Now, I love terminology. And of course, I'm always talking about how words have power. And I find this fascinating. We can talk about the East Coast, Eastern Seaboard, all right? And we can talk about the eastern part of the country. We can talk about, I live in California, Santa Barbara, the western part of the country. There's the Southwest. You just referred to the Midwest. The Midwest. Whatever happened to the Mideast?
I know. It's like, right. There's no mid-north or mid-south.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of quirky, almost along the lines of something that comedian Stephen Wright said the other day. I just thought was the most hilarious thing, which most of the stuff he says is they're brain teasers. I just had flashbacks of deja vu moments. I love it. We're talking with no, we're not talking with Stephen Wright. Maybe one day. We're talking with Stephanie Redfeather. She is our guest here on the program. We're talking about empathy. We're talking about a lot of different things as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and I want to ask you, Stephanie Redfeather, what about the concept, and some would probably say the reality of, past lives, reincarnation? And I know that it's written about in many of the ancient wisdom teachings, including the Bible, and or at least many of the apocryphal. I always find that term rather interesting because it was a bunch of guys who decided what would be in what is the Protestant version of the 66 books. And I've seen the criterion that each book had to pass. There's one book in the Old Testament that doesn't belong there. That's the Song of Solomon. And I've read the Song of Solomon, and it's all basically about sex, but it doesn't meet the criterion for all of the other books. But anyway, that aside, throughout ancient times, reincarnation was a real thing. It was something that people really felt very strongly about, not to the extent, unlike the Catholic Church in the early days. They didn't think, oh, I can slough off this lifetime because I'm coming back again and I can go good next time. I'll do bad this lifetime and then I'll be good the next one. That's not how people looked at it. So it's very interesting. But what about this aspect of past lives?
Mm-hmm. And I absolutely honor people's beliefs who don't believe in reincarnation or past lives. For me, it's absolutely true. And the way I think of it is that before each lifetime, my soul is making a choice of, do I want to be a man or woman? What country do I want to be born in? What year? Who's going to be my mom and dad? What are going to be the major movements? Kind of setting up these sort of major pieces for the growth and experience of my soul. And so I truly believe that in each lifetime, if there's anything unresolved from a past life, or if there's any trauma or wounding that didn't get healed, it will come through and it will have an effect. And I can give a real life example. 2 years ago, when my book, The Evolutionary Empath, came up, I started having this experience of, I couldn't catch my breath. I had trouble breathing. My throat felt tight. My chest felt tight. This was on a Monday when my Evolutionary Empath podcast launched. And by Thursday, I was locked down. I couldn't function. I called upon a particular friend. I knew what technique I needed to support me, and immediately went back to a past life. And I've never had this much clear detail. The late 1700s, where I was a young woman. We were in a community descended from the Puritans, and I had been drowned for speaking out. And so with my first book about to go out in the world in a big way, this past life trauma got triggered. Same thing again with my empath activation cards, a different past life where I was part of a secret order that practiced, high level consciousness practices and mystery school practices. It was my soul contract in that lifetime to take those teachings public. And the church found out, they confiscated my work and locked me up. And so with this deck coming out, all of that fear came welling up. And so I was able to work through it and bring that to resolution. So for me, I have no doubt that I have had past lives and that they have a real effect.
Ah, 'tis a witch! Cast her out and burn her at the stake!
I have been burned at the stake too.
I find it interesting when they have these television programs and movies about that period of time. And of course, history has shown us what actually caused the hysteria, not amongst those who were accused, mind you, but amongst the accusers, was due to a mold that caused hallucinations when they would eat the bread that was made from the grain.
I haven't heard that.
Yeah, yeah. And like that makes sense because they didn't have a lot of, preserving aspects, and it didn't take much. And it would go throughout the entire container, if you will, of the grain that they had stored until they finally realized that apparently science has done some research. They went back to that area and I guess dug up some of these things. Then they found this mold. And this mold causes hallucinations that could be interpreted as, oh, you're doing whatever it is you're doing. And I thought that was real interesting. We're talking with Stephanie Redfeather. Stephanie Redfeather's website is bluestartemple.org. Where does the Blue Star Temple come from?
Yeah, so a number of years ago, I felt that the name and the structure of my business was shifting. And so I was madly petitioning the universe. What is the unifying theme? Where are you leading me? What do I need to do? And I was falling asleep one night and was startled awake with the phrase Blue Star University. And I was like, oh my God, yes, a university. That makes sense. Oh, yeah, and so I'm, and then 10 seconds later, I'm like, what? A university? How am I supposed to do that? What, all of that stuff that happens, you get excited and then all of a sudden you're like, how am I going to do that? So they let me stew in that for a few days. And then they said the first step is Blue Star Temple, which, I don't know. I still don't know where all this is headed, if it's going to be brick and mortar, if I'm going to create a nonprofit or a church, or if I'm going to have land somewhere. I'm just doing each step as it's shown to me. But I have a very strong connection to the star relatives. And I feel that I have had many incarnations on the star Sirius. And so the main association with Blue Star is the star Sirius, but it also weaves in the energy of our Earth, which is a blue star or blue planet, and the same with Venus, because I do a lot of work with the divine feminine teachings as well. So all of those energies are encoded in Blue Star Temple.
Stephanie Redfeather, bluestartemple.org is the website. This is Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and I thank you so much for staying with us here on the program, which you can watch on YouTube at the Tell Me Your Story website. Make sure you look for the guy with the black hat. Well, it kind of looks black in this picture, but it's also Richard Dugan, and you can't miss it. I did find Stephanie. There is another Tell Me Your Story up on YouTube, so got to make sure you go to the right one. And also on the podcast, SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, and many other locations. You said you have a Blue Star podcast. Tell us about the genesis of that and the basic focus. It would be maybe along the same lines of what we're talking about, right?
Well, it's not an ongoing podcast. It is it's a 12 episode podcast.
Okay.
That I launched when my Evolutionary Empath book came out. And so it's all content related to being an empath, and it's got experiences and tools and all of that kind of stuff. So it is still available on my website, but it's not an ongoing podcast.
Okay. Well, that's fine. So the subject matter within that 12-part program, what would that be?
It just, following along, but not regurgitating what's in the book, but talking about the fact that empaths are here for a cosmic mission, that we're not an accident, we're not crazy, that we are here to help humanity ascend to the next level of consciousness. I talk about why we're an anomaly in Western medicine and Western culture. I talk about practical things like boundaries and energy hygiene, embodiment, and the whole realm.
Oh, please talk to us. I've never heard this term before. Energy hygiene?
Yes. So it's basically like if you think of your physical hygiene, right? You got to brush your teeth, take a shower, and brush your hair, and all of those sorts of things. So energy hygiene comprises the practices that we need to do on a daily basis to keep our energy field clean. So smudging, all these different ways of clearing energy. You can use deep breaths. You can kind of use your hands or a tool to brush yourself off. You can do guided visualizations. You can do work to, etherically, if you will, in your mind's eye, make repairs to and restore the integrity of your energy field. So all of these things fall under the concept of energy hygiene.
Well, it does sound like a good idea, obviously. I know that for myself, it's one of those things that I hadn't even thought of, but it makes sense. And I know that in order to keep ourselves well, both physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, there are certain things like listening to that still small voice that I want to talk to you about now, because we encourage people here on this program to participate in the decade of perfect vision, the 2020s. We encourage people to go within, to listen to that still small voice, just to be quiet, to find that quiet, calm, peaceful place, and just to relax, to re-energize, to rejuvenate, to receive encouragement, insight, enlightenment, maybe even a little entertainment. I have never known my friend, that is how I refer to my still small voice, ever to put me in harm's way. Kind of ticked me off from time to time with some of the direction. I was traveling to work one day on a bicycle back in Phoenix, Arizona, and I was bicycling through farm fields, not actually through them, but they had the roads, and the blocks were 1 mile square. So I'm bicycling on to the transmitter site where the broadcast site was, and all of a sudden I get this prompting at the next intersection, turn right. And I'm just, what? No, 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 no. I kept on going. I went past the intersection, and the impulse got stronger and stronger and stronger. I went a half a mile, and it wouldn't go away. So I literally turned around. I went back to that intersection. Of course, in this case, I made the left. I went the direction that I was asked to. Went up a mile, went over a mile again, went back down a mile, back to the same street I was on, and continued on my way. The only explanation was that my friend was testing me to see if I was serious about following the promptings. Now, I could have continued on, and I probably would have had no harm. But that, to me, was one of those tests saying, do you really trust me? Are you really going to follow the promptings? I'd like for you to talk a little bit, or a lot about, we've got plenty of time, talk to us about that still small voice, because you listen to it, but there are other voices that you listen to too, and not to be kidding around here, the angels and your guides and so forth. And I'd like for you to talk a little bit about that as well, and how you differentiate between your still small voice, whatever that may be for you, and those other entities, the angels and guardians and so on and so forth.
Yeah. The way I think of that still small voice, it is the voice of what is right and true for me. It's what is in my highest good and highest alignment. And so honestly, the still small voice is directly connected to all of those entities. It is directly connected to my higher self, my spiritual team, my angels and guardians. And so in that way, I don't differentiate. I might call them different things. I might say, well, I was talking to my guides, or I was listening to my intuition, but to me, they're all working symbiotically together. And so that's kind of the simple answer of how that works for me.
Okay, all right. And the angels, guardian angels, whatever the other entities are that support you, how were you introduced to them? How did they come into your life to support you and guide you along with the rest of the crew?
Well, it took my spiritual awakening for me to come to a place where I could acknowledge them, be okay with them, recognize that they were there, and develop a relationship with them. So before my spiritual awakening, I didn't really feel their presence, probably because I wasn't conscious, I wasn't aware. Maybe I was just in my ignorance, or I had fear. I was born and baptized Lutheran. By the time I got to high school, I had moved in with my dad and stepmom. And so I was experimenting. My best friend was Baptist, so I went to Baptist church. My art teacher, who also led like not a Bible study, but like a devotional before school started, he was Pentecostal, so I tried that church. I went to Charismatic. So even before I had the language, I was seeking. And by the time I got to college, I was like, okay, I don't have this sorted out. And at this point, I'm just going to put it on the back burner. And when it's time for me to figure this out, I will figure it out. And so I kind of had this understanding that I haven't always been with them, but they have always been with me.
Yeah. I would agree with you there. I've had some rather interesting experiences of my own where, there are certain instances where there's part of me that says I shouldn't be alive today if it weren't for those angels. One was a bicycle accident where I was in total violation of the law. I was riding on the left-hand side of the road, coming home after delivering Sunday papers, and the light was green for me. There was a Toyota truck with a little camper on top. He wasn't looking my way. He was looking to his left to see if there was oncoming traffic. And he pulled out very slowly, I might add, and rolled right on top of me and the bicycle. Now, because of the metal baskets that were on my bicycle, I was actually able to crawl out from under the truck and my bicycle, and I scared him half to death when I rapped on his window. Because he was sitting on the accelerator and he couldn't figure out why his car wasn't going because he didn't know he had hit me. No harm, no foul. I mean, my bike was dented up, but it wasn't his fault. And then there was one time, even when I was younger, we were traveling in Sedona, and there's this beautiful church. I believe it's called Church in the Rock. And it has this beautiful wall, concrete wall, that you walk up alongside. Well, I'm a little kid. I'm thinking, I'm going to walk up on top of this wall. Now, I love my mother dearly, but I've shared this story before, and they say your mother did this to you in a manner of speaking, because she said, Richard, get down from there. You're going to fall. And that's exactly what happened. I fell face first into the dirt. Big puff of dust went up, knocked the wind out of me. No injury other than that. But that was another one of those instances where I must have been looked after in some fashion, because those are the kinds of things that kids get into, and you think, how in the world did you survive? Well, I can only say it must have been the angels, because they knew that, like I've got this purpose that I've got to fulfill, and I can't do it if I'm not here. So it's very fascinating. Stephanie Redfeather, I'm curious as to the connection that you have with the Native Americans. I struggled for years because I didn't want to intrude. I mean, I grew up in Phoenix and I was surrounded by all those reservations and everything, right? And then I do my DNA and I find out I am Native American from all the North, Central, and Southern Americas. And it's like, oh, that's why I was curious, but I wouldn't, because I didn't want to intrude, because I didn't think I belonged. And guess what? I belonged all the time. I've been through a sweat lodge. Unfortunately, I didn't make it to the end, but it was okay. They were very supportive. I've always been intrigued by the culture, by the medicine, by the life, by how they are connected to nature, and they know what's happening, they know what's coming, and so forth. Tell me about your experiences with the Native American culture, if you will.
Yeah. Well, it might be surprising to know that, as far as I know, I don't have any Native American blood in this lifetime. But when I was young, I know that I was recalling past lives, because I drew all the time, and all of my pictures were of horses and Indians. And whenever I would play with the local kids, cowboys and Indians, I was always the Indian. I had feathers and tomahawks and teepees and all of those things. And I don't mean to trivialize it, but at the consciousness of a very young person,
Yeah.
where did all of that come from?
Yeah.
Like just the, wanting to always be out in nature and climbing trees and playing with rocks. And there was something that was naturally expressing, that I was naturally drawing on. And so during my spiritual awakening, I was just drawn to indigenous traditions, native practices, because it resonated. So I'm not, I know cultural appropriation is a big hot term, and I've been accused of that by having the last name that I have. But the teacher of the Peruvian tradition that I practice, his name is Don Oscar Miro Quesada, and he calls it basically, universal shamanism. And the way that he teaches it, and the way that he encourages everyone to practice, is that it does, you can be a white girl from Illinois. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
These heart-centered, earth-based wisdom traditions are for everyone. It is how we all used to live in harmony with the earth. And as things evolved and changed, certain cultures that we now refer to as the indigenous cultures were able to preserve those traditions, while others of us, went to other practices of religion or spirituality. So for me, it feels natural. It feels right.
Yeah. I was paid, I don't know if it was a compliment necessarily, and I'm not saying backhanded by any means. I had the opportunity of interviewing a Chumash Indian, or Shumash Indian, here in Santa Barbara. He lives here. And we did an entire program or two out at the beach. Little digital recorder and a couple of microphones, and we just talked about just like what we're doing here. Only we were out there sitting in our beach chairs chatting away. And I asked him about the indigenous peoples of this area, especially in modern days. He says, "Well, the new Shumash are you." He was talking to me, but he was also talking to the rest of the population who are wanting to connect, who are wanting to carry on what I will use the term, because even though it's overused, the sustainable lifestyle that the Native Americans, North Central and South American, have lived with and lived by for, I'm going to say, centuries. I don't have the history information, and I was just kind of taken aback, like, wow, that's a heavy responsibility too, But
Yeah.
I'm willing to take it on, because it says, okay, let's make a change. And I hear the arguments, especially when it comes to what's happening to the planet and climate change and the science. And to be honest with you, I never want to talk about those things. What I want to talk about is cleaning up our home. That's what I'm talking about. If it results in something beneficial, great. But we've made a mess. You're not supposed to defecate where you eat. And quite honestly, that's what we do. Animals don't do that. And yet we do. And I don't necessarily mean that literally. So that's the reason that I feel so strongly about taking that on. And I'm honored that he said that. And I think that you are in the same category, especially being there in Kansas. I'm sure that there were a lot of tribes on reservations around you.
Yeah, and I would like to share also that one of my other teachers, Linda Starwolf, talks about shamanic consciousness, and that is one of her gifts to the world, is really helping everybody understand that we all have shamanic consciousness, even more than a shamanic tradition or a shamanic lineage. We are all shamanic beings. We are all capable of tuning into the different realms and receiving guidance and communing with other sentient beings and the subtle energies, and that everything is alive and sentient, and that everything is communing whether you realize it or not. And so to me, that transcends any particular religion or spirituality or native tradition or whatever, that we are all shamanic beings, whether we apply that or believe it or not.
Yeah. And I would agree with you on that. And I think that's one of the things that tends to sort of frustrate some people, is the fact that okay, you say it's appropriating. I don't agree with you on that. I don't say that it's appropriating anything. I think that what it is it is wanting to carry on those traditions, being respectful of where they come from. You talked about using ceremony. Now, I was born and raised Catholic. So you being born and raised Lutheran, we could have a real problem here, but we don't. We do not. But the one thing my mother did for me was she did not force me to go to Mass. One Sunday morning, I get home from delivering the papers, and I didn't want to get up at 9 o'clock to go to Mass. And she said, okay. Years later, in my 20s, I asked her why. She says, because I didn't want you to push away from the church, which I did not. Now, I don't even consider myself a lapsed Catholic. I consider myself having moved on to the next level. It's like when I told somebody about my search, they said, well, once you find Jesus, your search is over. And I said, actually, once I find Jesus, my search has just begun. And it continues. I hope I never stop searching. The only time I will ever stop searching is when I leave this world. Or as Bernie Siegel, who has been on this program, has said many times, he says, don't use the word transform or pass on. He was talking about his wife who had died. He says, she died. What's wrong with saying the word die? And I said, well, because it has a lot of negative connotation to it. He says, but that's what happened. They died. So the only time I'll stop searching in this lifetime is when I die. Thank you, Bernie. He is such a wonderful man. But I take it that your search continues as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I heard a saying a long time ago that the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. and that is the truth. I have a PhD. Okay, so what? I mean, I am a ravenous student. And there are times that I just feel like, oh my God, how am I going to get to everything I'm supposed to do in this lifetime? There's so much to learn or remember, if you want to think of it that way. But yeah, one of the practices that's very important to me in my work is I don't live my life as an open book, but I choose where to be transparent just because I need some privacy.
Right.
But whenever I go through some kind of ordeal or epiphany or healing experience or symbolic death and rebirth, as soon as I have it processed and metabolized, I am offering its nuggets to the people that I serve. The story that I told you about the past life where it was my sole contract to bring secret teachings out to the world. You can bet, it's still fresh for me, but you can bet I'm going to write a story about it. It's going to become medicine. And so that is one of the ways that I dedicate. It's not even a conscious choice. It's just what my calling compels me to do. That as soon as I've learned something, grown, had an epiphany, I am passing it on and sharing it, because I haven't arrived. I'm not done, you know. And so I think it's important to be an example for people. And I appreciate the mentors that I have that were willing to be vulnerable and show those parts of themselves and not stand up on the stage as though they are perfect and porcelain, you know.
Mm. Yeah, I hear you. You know, I've even thought about that in terms of, okay, what's going to be my place in history? You know, I used to think about this many years ago, and I was chatting with a good friend of mine, Charlie Patton. He's actually related to the general. And, you know, we were sitting there talking one day, and he said, oh, I know my role. You know, I'm going to be known internationally and this and that and the other thing. And I don't know. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. But it was just real interesting, the conversation that we had, because we do try to find our place in the universe. We try to find our position. And sometimes the ego tends to, you know, want a little bit more than what's really supposed to be there. I've been very fortunate that the universe hasn't had to do it much lately. But when I was younger, I would get my comeuppance every so often if I got too big for my britches. And I'm grateful for that.
Mhm.
I'm also grateful for the thousands, and I mean this, thousands of people who have played a part and a role in my being here with you today. I wouldn't be here right now with you talking about your website, bluestartemple.org, or the work that you're doing, or your empathy activation cards, or the evolutionary empath, if it weren't for all those people. Do you think that that is starting to change, where people are starting to recognize that they aren't where they are because of everything they did? Now, granted, we could discuss choices, and all of the choices I've made have put me right here talking with you. That is probably true too. But in terms of the support team, shall we say, it's made up of thousands, and it grows each day.
Mhm.
Talk to us a little bit about that.
And I would say that support team is humans in bodies as well as the etheric ones. You know, and I think that our intention matters, right? It's like the universe is up there with their pad of paper just waiting to fulfill your order. But our job is to get clear about what we want, and to have enough focus, to have an intention, and stay the course for those energies to generate enough to pick up their own momentum. So there's a concept I've been aware of that I try more and more to embrace, which is that universal cosmic wave that is sort of carrying you along, right? If you're in alignment and you're not fighting, and you recognize that there's more to creation, right? There's you as the beginning point with your intention or your vision, but then that energy radiates out, and it's like a clarion call that calls everything that is resonant to that vision to you, like a magnet, to manifest. And so, you know, that is a mystery I am in process of learning. I'm much better than I used to be, but I am so clear that there are forces holding me up, carrying me, that there are machinations happening behind the scenes that I'm not even aware of.
She is Stephanie Redfeather. I am Richard Dugan. This is Tell Me Your Story. You are listening to the program that brings you new paradigms for a new world, and we give you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. Some of the other things I'd like to talk about before we run out of time, I'm curious about this concept, and that is spiritual bias. I've always considered that if I am coming from a spiritual perspective, and let's just say being led by my still small voice, etc., that there is no bias. There's no judgment. I'm not, I'm not trying to get one up over on anybody else. I'm not saying I'm suppressing my ego per se, because we do need the ego. That's part of who and what we are too. But what is spiritual bias?
Yeah, I'm not sure I have a well-practiced answer for you, because that's not actually something that I've talked about or contemplated much. What I do know is, as human beings, we can try with as much consciousness as possible to be neutral, to not have attachment to an idea or perspective or an outcome. And the truth of the matter is, we all have some kind of bias. And so whether or not spiritual bias exists, I'm not sure I have a whole lot more to say on the matter. Otherwise, I would just be kind of making it up, because it's not really something that I've talked about much.
I understand. No, and that's just fine. I've never wanted a guest to elucidate on anything that they weren't either A, comfortable elucidating on, or B, didn't have a lot of knowledge on it, which is fine. But it does spur thought. It does spur conversation. I still like to think that there are moments in our lives where we actually do see things from an objective perspective. In spite of the scientific evidence that says that, if we're conducting an experiment, we in effect are affecting that experiment. There's that great story that you hear of this group of scientists trying to repeat the results of an experiment. And they get a different result every time, and they couldn't figure out why for the longest time. And then it dawned on them, oh yeah, it's us.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just find that interesting. One other thing I want to talk about before we bring this to a close, and I thank you for giving us so much time here, are interconnectedness. I've used the example of Star Trek's The Borg, and again, I'm speaking strictly from an infrastructural way, okay? Not the malefic, evil content, okay? Each one of them is an individual. Each one of them has different abilities. Each one of them carries out a different task. But they're getting information from a single source. In our case, we'd like to think that we're getting our information through our still small voice, through the angels, through the guides, etc., from the divine, whatever that may be to an individual. And that your task isn't my task, and vice versa. But when we are following that still small voice and doing the things that we're being guided to do, we are contributing to and participating in the big picture.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And I'd like for you to talk to us about how not only we are connected, but how that connection affects the people around us who may not be so aware of their connection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a complex concept, and consciousness has a lot to do with that, right? If you're not aware of the connectedness, you're not going to experience it as such, if that makes sense. Or there's more of an experience of separation, or us and them, which is also just part of the human construct at this point in our evolutionary development, is still remembering what we all forgot.
Yeah.
But one of the things I talk about in my Evolutionary Empath book is that how we are in human form is different than how we are in spirit form, if you will, or energetic form, when we are not in form.
Mm-hmm.
But yet in a body, for many of us, there's a part of us that remembers what it's like in spirit form, where we are all connected. We are all one. We're all very aware of that connection. You can think of another person, if you want to think of it that way, and they immediately are there, or you're connected with them. Like, you know, the idea of boundaries, like we talk about in the 3D, doesn't exist in the same way. And so the human world can be very confounding, especially for a lot of people who are sensitive, because we're like, it worked differently when we were, you know, when we were not informed. This is really weird down here. And so there is this simultaneous concept of you and I are one, but we are not the same. Mm. And so that is a concept that I share. I talk about it in my book because it's important, and it's okay that you have your own sovereign energy field, that you are distinct and differentiated from other people around you in terms of having your own ideas, having your own beliefs, having the right to take up space and to have your own thoughts and beliefs and to choose who you let into that world. So in that way, we're distinct and different. We are not the same, and that is perfectly okay, while at the same time we are all connected because we are all energy beings. And so it's almost like there's all of these energetic, you know, cords that are just sort of attached to everybody, and you pluck one end of the string, and whoever is attached to it is going to feel that vibration, whether they're conscious of it or not, which is why one of the concepts that I talk about with a lot of clients and students is when we make a big change, you know, have a transformation, you know, make decisions that, okay, this is, I'm letting go of these old belief systems, or I'm choosing to be this way, or I'm claiming my voice, or whatever it is, our energetic signature changes distinctly. And what is no longer in resonance with us is now in dissonance. And so that dissonance is going to vibrate all of those disharmonious things up to the surface to be dealt with, which could be relationships. It could be people blowing up around you, accusing you of things. Because when it's human nature to want to keep everybody we know in a box, right? We want, there's comfort in the predictability and the dependability of, I'm going to say this and they're going to say that, and here's how, you know, they like this, they don't like that. There's security and safety in you staying in your box. But when your vibration changes, you leave your box. Yeah. And then everybody else is like, hey, get back in your box. And so, you know, it's very interesting. The subtle changes, like, for example, I did a cord cutting with a woman whose relationship with her husband was coming to an end. They were not living together. He was many miles away. Did a cord cutting. Minutes later, he called out of the blue, hey, I was thinking about you. How's it going? Clearly, he felt the energetic shift, even though he had no conscious idea. Not, you know, it didn't register in his mind, hey, somebody just cut the cords, I better call. It was just, for him, probably just as random, but it shows it's an example of just how connected we all are.
It is, and people need to, so to speak, get with the program and recognize that. I love some of these TV shows and movies that will start out showing multiple stories, and they're totally independent of one another. And as the movie progresses, these stories start to cross and intertwine, and you never thought, it's almost like you didn't see it coming, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And I've always loved that concept in a program like that. I was watching one with a young kid, curly-headed kid, and it was a TV show, and I wish I could remember the name of the show. But it was just fascinating to see how these independent stories came together over the course of the program, over the course of time. And that's what happens in our lives. I mean, it's amazing. Sometimes you'll have a fleeting moment with someone. I was walking down the street a year or so ago. So this one guy was carrying this book, and I was behind him just far enough. But I noticed the title, and it rather intrigued me. So I kind of caught up to him and said, I noticed the book that you're carrying, da-da-da-da. And we had a little brief conversation. And it's been said from a metaphysical and spiritual construct that the people that you interact with, no matter how briefly or how long you have been interacting with, lifetimes on infinitum maybe, going back millennia, who knows, but that they are part of what's referred to in Life Between Lives as your cluster.
Hmm.
And I love that. I just, and I don't know about you, Stephanie, I can go into a room filled with people and I can start just carrying on a conversation with somebody. You walk up and say hello and how are you? And it's funny too, because sometimes I'll walk into the room at first and I'm a little shy. I don't know if I'm going to get a drink first and I'm just going to sit over here in the corner. And after a while, it's like boring, it's like, this is no fun, you know? And I want to get to know people, and I like, and who knows, I may find a guest for the program who's got a great story to tell about the work that they're doing to transform their lives and the lives of the people around them. And that's what you're doing. And we thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Richard.
This is Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I'm Richard Dugan, and we've come to the virtual end of our program. I say virtual because it could go on for hours, for all I know, but we're going to bring it to an end by asking you, Stephanie, the 3 questions that I like to ask my guests. You may have addressed them to some degree during the program, but I like to ask them directly. Before I do that, though, I want to talk to you, the listener and the viewer. And thank you for listening to and viewing and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. We do come your way every Sunday at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Mondays at 1 a.m., and Wednesdays at 9 a.m. for a special edition of Tell Me Your Story. We also encourage you to listen to the podcasts on SoundCloud and iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and many other locations. We also hope that you'll go to YouTube and watch the Tell Me Your Story interviews. They are on video. I produce them up and post them, and away we go. And I thank you for subscribing. I'm at a whopping 41 subscribers since what is it, July of this year? But that's okay. I'm not looking to get to 1 million or 100,000 or 100 for that matter. Whoever wants to subscribe, subscribe. I'm grateful that we're at 51,000 listens over the past almost, what would it be? 4 years, 3 years, 2018, 19, 20. No, that's right, 4 years. I never claimed to be a mathematician, ladies and gentlemen. Needless to say, 51,000 is a heck of a lot of listens. Thank you. Thank you for doing so. And if you are so inclined, we would greatly appreciate financial support from you if you can do so. If you can, go to PayPal. And when they ask you for an email address to send it to, it's richard@richarddugan.com. richard@richarddugan.com, and participate in. We don't ask a lot, but we do ask you to participate in the decade of perfect vision, the 2020s. Listen to that still small voice. Listen to your angels. Listen to your guides and your guardians, and just sit there and be still and be quiet. And maybe there's no instruction. Maybe it's just words of encouragement to support you and lift you up. And maybe it's just a time to be quiet. So, as one of my guests has said, even if it's just for 60 seconds. So, we hope that you'll do that. To my final 3 questions, and every time I do this, I feel like I'm on a game show as we're doing the bonus round. Yes. Who is Stephanie Redfeather?
An evolutionary being who changes from second to second.
What is it that you hope to or want to achieve through the work that you are doing now?
My biggest focus is to support other sensitive souls in their awakening and their conscious thriving on planet Earth, and to make all of my difficulties turn into ease for them.
And finally, what is your life's purpose?
To help raise consciousness on the planet.
And we thank you for being there to do that. We're working in concert with you to do just that through these programs. And we thank you for giving us so much time here on the program.
You're very welcome.
And we thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. We are giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. And until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast, love to love.